Chapter 8 of my book, which is the very last chapter of the first part of my book when I deal with the classical viewpoints on whether Bhakti is inherent or inherited. Chapter 8 is called the Brahma Sutra and Baladev Vidyabhushan. Brahma Sutra is another name for Vedanta Sutra, and here Baladev Vidyabhushan is included because he has written a very famous Gaudiya commentary to the Vedanta called Govinda Bhashya. So although in the very beginning of my book, in the very first chapter, I made it clear that for us Gaudiyas, our ultimate Praman is not Vedanta Sutra, but is the Bhagavatam, which is considered natural commentary, Artayam Brahma Sutranam, on the sutras and so on. Nonetheless, I'm addressing different arguments, continuing in the spirit of the previous chapter where I tried to address some opposing views. Here there are also some arguments in the context of Vedanta Sutra, apparently promoting inherent bhakti, and as well Baladev Vidyabhushan in his commentary. So I will really deal with the specific sections that has to do with this argument in detail, and I try to analyze these sutras and try to show, for example, when Vedanta is speaking in terms of mukti, as it does, how actually it's speaking about different types of mukti, not necessarily only in the direction of bhakti swarup or this or that, but mukti with body, mukti without the body, by this confirming, for example, the possibility of permanent Brahma Sayuja, or of course Bhakti Swarup, Atmaram, Prem, different degrees of liberated and even post-liberated status. Indeed, the very word Sayuja, which is generally understood as in personal terms, Baladev will give a very particular devotional interpretation to that. And how in the beginning of Vedanta Sutra, the notion of spiritual body is not there, that generally this is the main argument, but actually speaking about other types of mukti, and eventually the idea of being liberated in a spiritual body is coming eventually. So apart from proving from Vedanta Sutra how bhakti is not inherent, also I resort to other texts by Sri Vidyabhushan, like his Brahma Sutra Karika Bhashya, who is another commentary to the Vedanta Sutra, interestingly, written before his well-known Govinda Bhashya, where he again establishes clearly bhakti is not inherent. And then I go to his Siddhanta Ratnam, which is a very nice book by Baladev Vidyabhushan, which is the Jewel Ratnam of Siddhanta, which is a book that comes after the Govinda Bhashya. So for those who would like to argue, well, Govinda Bhashya, yes, no, but he's saying that bhakti is not inherent, not only in the Govinda Bhashya, but before the Govinda Bhashya and after his Govinda Bhashya. And so all of this in a consensual way established very clearly bhakti's non-inherence in the Jiva, as well as other works by Baladev Vidyabhushan like Prameya Ratnavali and others that I also quote there. And in connection to that, I finished this chapter by quoting some very important and well-known sections from the Bhakti Sandarbha of Srila Jiva Goswami, which very clearly again establish how bhakti is being gifted, in sadhu sangha is being received, and according to the devotional impressions, bhakti samskaras we are receiving, accordingly we will develop a particular internal devotional affinity. So with this I finished the first part of my whole book. And for some, that may be the end of the whole book, in the sense that many readers may be fully satisfied by going to the classical viewpoints and to what Siddhanta says, because as I always mention, if we are having a debate or a conversation on Gaudiya Siddhanta, let's say, for example, with someone from outside our particular paribar, let's say someone from another Gaudiya paribar, we are not to quote our own guru or the gurus of our own paribar, where we are to resort to our universal consensual scriptural canon. So for those who take that stance, may be fully satisfied after reading this first part, and that may not feel the necessity of going to the second part. But personally and humbly, I will invite and recommend, of course, all the readers to go through the second part, where I try to deal with the contemporary viewpoints. And I even will recommend for some particular readers to first go to the second part and go through the contemporary viewpoints, because they may be more accustomed to deal with that perspective and learn how to accommodate that in connection to the first part and the classical viewpoints. So the second part that will start from chapter 9 and we will continue seeing in the next clip, will deal with how or why some of our contemporary acharyas in the Bhakti Vinod Paribar seemed at times to be saying something different than from it was the classical viewpoint, apparently, and how we are to understand that, how we are to harmonize that, and how we are to integrate that, how we are to integrate the second part of my book with the first part of my book, how we are to integrate contemporary viewpoints and how to show and understand them totally aligned with the opinion of our classical original Gaudiya Acharyas.